Here's Mark Playne. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Sonia.
Sean's just been talking us through his new book and that he's been reading about Bitcoin, and probably something that you yourself, I mean, we were looking, well, when I say we, the royal we, I was looking at your website, Not On The BBC. And what was interesting about that, of course, was that you cover so much, you know, and one of the things was, first of all, let's introduce him. Mark Playne, he's an author, he's a director, he's many things, but he is also the host of that website that I'm talking about. I've watched some interviews with him. Mark is also the author of this book that our lovely Kerry Murray came on before and reviewed. Brilliant book, highly recommended. We're going to get around to talking about that in a minute. But Mark, I'd like to go back with you first of all, because I first came across you without realizing it was you, talking about the sort of anti-science of masks. And I thought, this is really interesting. This guy knows what he's talking about. And that was a couple of years back now. But you originally were a pro-masker, weren't you, when it all started?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But when I say I was a pro-masker, you know, we're watching the kind of the pandemic starting in China, and I thought they were going to release a serious bioweapon because we've been expecting that. So as soon as I saw it starting, I was like, hang on, here we go, get masks. But I mean, the first bit of research you did is you don't wear the blue masks. If you're going to wear a mask, you have to upgrade it. You know, you need proper masks. And I was kind of talking about kind of putting colloidal silver on the front to act as an extra kind of filter. But, you know, I was abroad at the time. I was in India when the lockdown swept through. And as I arrived back about 3 days before the British lockdown started, and almost, you know, immediately was like, hang on, there's something seriously wrong here. And then switched from kind of telling everyone to buy a mask before they sold out to, you know, don't waste your time, and realizing what was going on, and it was an incredible policy. It wasn't, you know, the mask was just, it was a way of saying I believe in this pandemic, wasn't it? That's right. It was written in invisible big letters on the front, you know.
One of the videos that I watched of yours, which really turned my stomach, and not that I was wearing this mask anyway, but one of the things that you discussed was how the single-use face masks, when you put them under a microscope, they have like these plastic worms in them, right, in the fibers. Talk about that.
Yes. So there's work with Dr. T. You know, there was many people on the kind of internet who kind of found this, and of course we picked up on it, investigated. Dr. T bought in a microscope specially for it, and we did the podcast with her. And the single face masks, they are a network of a lattice of a synthetic fiber that is just beautifully repetitive and just is what it is. It's man-made. But amongst those white fibers were these unknown black fibers that we could see. We found them in not only one type mask, it was from seven different factories across China that were up to 3,000 miles apart. Wow. So the idea that it was some sort of dust that had been left over from a previous manufacturing process was, you know, we could rule that out straight away. And these were masks that had been sourced from the NHS, directly from the NHS, via doctors, dentists, via professionals, 7 different sources. So when we first looked at them, so you see those videos we've left them there, you know, they were moving under heat, they were moving under humidity. Awful. So we were like, hang on, is this a type of worm? But those were the very early videos. You know, we now know that, well, when we say we now know, because I've got to tell you what happened then. Of course, as soon as we found them, we were like, right, okay, they're so visible, so easy. You can buy a microscope for £17.50 off Amazon that you could kind of plug into your computer and see them clearly. Everyone could see them. And, you know, quite obviously we're breathing them in. And, you know, we sent them off to labs. So we got labs interested. And of course, you call up a lab and say, can you investigate this for us? And they go, oh, yeah, preliminary investigation, 500. And if you want the full report, 2,000. The doctors gathered the money together. And then the first lab went quiet. Then the second lab went quiet. And then the third, then the fourth. And it kind of ended up with like, we had labs in Norway, around Europe. And it ended up with someone I know who kind of, oh, Mark, there's no problem. I've been working with this lab for 20 years. I speak to them every day. I've watched the children grow up. It'd be absolutely fine. Give it to me. I'll get your problem sorted. And within a week, I was being CC'd on emails. I've known you all my life. This is affecting the population of Britain, everything. You need to reply. You can't go quiet me. You know, they completely cut the severance. So that communication, so that kind of reverse conclusion was The labs were terrified of what it was, because if it had been a fibre, if it was left over from manufacturing pants or T-shirts and it was some sort of new synthetic fibre, they'd have gone, oh, guess what we found?
That's right.
Here's your invoice for £2,000. They wouldn't tell us. They wouldn't tell us. They all went quiet.
Yeah,
so,
creepy.
Now, the way we understand it, and of course, when we say, how do you prove anything? You can't prove it because the proof is owned by major companies and corporations who can do the tests. But
checking their own homework.
Exactly. But as far as we know, these are carbon nanotubes that have been filled with a hydrogel. And I was under the theory. So if you imagine, when you say carbon nanotube, it's one layer thick piece of atom, like kind of graphene. And they're making basically straws. And inside was a liquid, because we could see the liquid spilling out under the microscope. We could see some sort of gel. I just presumed that it was like a very clever time release mechanism. So if you imagine ramming a straw full of some gel and you just leave it in water, it will very slowly leak out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. But when I interviewed the fantastic Carrie Madej, she said, no, what it actually is they release when they're hit with a certain frequency. So when something is a certain electromagnetic frequency is emitted by probably mobile phone towers, that will command the release of these liquids. Yeah, this gel, whatever's inside.
Wow. I mean, it's mind-blowing, really. You talk about the fact checkers, really quite pathetic, obviously, the fact checkers. Your turnaround, though, was so quick, because I'm very sorry, your mum was dying with cancer. So I'm really sorry to hear that. And that you were able to see quite clearly that some of the same things that were in play to do with cancer were also in play to do with vaccinations, right? So that was quite a big moment for you, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of my turning point, because, my mother's illness, like with many other people, took me on a deep dive where, I was researching with my head waking up on a keyboard kind of in the morning, just researching in absolute panic to try and find out what could be done. And of course, found out the crazy amounts and met some amazing doctors who completely narrative busting and everything else. And then when my mother died, of course, you can't, once you've gone down the rabbit hole, you keep going. And I was trying to raise awareness and all the kind of cancer issues, and everyone was like, old people die and people get cancer like this. And then at that very point became aware that the story with vaccination was very similar. It was basically a medical myth. It's a money-making myth put out by a massive billionaire industry. And I was just in my naivety. I was like, oh yeah, people can listen, but I'm going to change all my strategy from talking about cancer to talking about vaccinations, investigating vaccinations, because people will listen because it's about babies and young children. But that was another learning curve for me, because of course it's the same hypnosis, mind control that's gone on.
Exactly the same thing. So talk to us about your book, which I understand. So I think that what was happening with you is you were in the process of completing another project. Is that correct? And you needed something to sort of, I don't mean to use the word filler. I can't think of anything else at this moment in time. A bridge. That's the word. That'll do nicely. And you rang an ex-girlfriend. And well done, Sean. And you rang an ex-girlfriend and you kind of said to her, what about stories and everything? She said, what about that one from South America? Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, you've got a great memory. Yeah, exactly. That's how
I do my best. I don't have a great memory, but I do remember some things if they're salient to me. And so obviously you wrote this in a month, or even 3 weeks to a month, which is quite phenomenal. And I know quite a lot about your history now, including the fact that you used to sell jewelry in Leicester Square, which is hilarious because I used to work on the Empire in Leicester Square at the front door around about the same time. Yes.
Oh, wow. We would have been opposite each other because I used to set up outside the Empire. You
would have been one of the people that I regularly came out and threatened to spray with water.
Oh, was that the way that?
Yeah. And, yes, absolutely. So tell us about this. Tell us.
What's it called? Sorry, 3 seconds in.
Bogotá. Bogotá is the capital of Colombia.
Oh.
So it's basically, I flew into Bogotá one night and ended up with my girlfriend and ended up getting a taxi that we thought was safe because there was a policeman asleep in it. Because we'd already heard you've got to be really careful and pick the right taxi. But it turned much worse than this. And we ended up taking what's now called the Millionaire's Ride, where basically it's a taxi scam. And but nowadays people just tend to end up robbed at kind of gunpoint, knife point. But back then, there's a lot of people disappearing. And that was one way to get rid of the evidence. And we were involved with a professional gang. Obviously, that policeman was asleep then. What becomes quite clear is this gang was working with the police. So they couldn't leave any witnesses.
Yeah. It's
So-
lawlessness. You catalogue lawlessness. I thought,
Wow.
you know, some of my experiences in life were wild, but this is some of this stuff that I don't want to give away, and I definitely don't want to give away the end. But
No.
there also is an addition that you've added to this version, right? Which is, I've got that right, I think, at the end, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
exactly.
a new
The epilogue. Yes.
it's an afterword I put in because the difficulty I had with the book is when, and you know, I learned a hell of a lot. Was we put it out as kind of like a thriller because it's written as a thriller, but of course there's a major difference between a thriller and a true story, because when there's a thriller, the writer is inside the head of every character because
Right.
they've designed them. I was up against real people. I don't really know what was going on in their head. We would only guess. So it ends up with a very different conclusion at the end of the basic story. And I just saw some of the feedback getting, because the book was selling well, and some of the people kind of wanted to know more detail of what really definitely was happening. And I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I really didn't. I had this kind of like dark cloud of like thinking I don't want to touch this, but enough people teased me. One of my kind of friends wrote back to me. I can't say what he could have said because I'll ruin the ending of the story, but he kind of suggested a new ending for the story. And I was like, I can't do that because it's a true story. The whole point of a true story is it's true. And anyway, I then decided to investigate more, and I did full research from where I could be, you know, without actually going there. And with the aid of some friends in Bogotá, put me on the clue to what really was happening. And it was bone chilling. It was completely bone chilling. And, you know, and you know, still today, they've got the street kids there, you know, and the street kids are hiding in the underground because they're safe underneath in the sewers from getting shot by the policemen, because the policemen get hired by shopkeepers. Yeah, you threw water at us, Sonia, in Bogotá.
Yeah.
When you have annoying people outside the shops who come in and steal things, they hire the policeman to shoot them or throw a grenade into the sleeping children, you know?
Yeah, it's horrendous.
That's the difference. That's a great difference between kind of like London and Bogotá.
Massive difference.
Yeah,
yes.
And those kids then hide in the sewers. And then the policemen were taking petrol and pouring it into the sewers and trying to set the kids on fire. And this is recent. This is in the last few years. That's the level of it, you know. And, you know, we talk about the body snatchers kind of in Britain, you know, collecting dead bodies, stealing them from the graveyard and murdering people to give to doctors for dissection so they could work out how the body works. But, you know, there was the cases that happening 5-6 years ago in Bogotá, where homeless people, one homeless person came round from being knocked unconscious, and he was in a vat with another 25 dead people, and he escaped to the police. And when they came back, they found the remains of kind of 21 bodies in the university. So these were bodies being collected for the medical students to experiment on.
Absolutely shocking.
The value of life is low. And I mean, it's an amazing country, and South America is amazing. And I do recommend everyone to go, even though my book it's probably destroyed the tourist industry of Colombia in some sort of way. I actually really recommend it. It's an amazing country, amazing people, amazing language, amazing culture. I can imagine. And when I came back from South America,
that comes over though. That does come over. Your love of it comes over. And I love this review. Quentin Tarantino does Rough Guide to Colombia. That's one review for this book, which I think is just fabulous. But you know, the thing is that I think it complements your work on Not On The Beeb as well. It doesn't feel like that's a completely different person. It doesn't feel like that.
I really appreciate you saying that. And I had a lovely one of the Freedom, you know, of our people kind of wrote back after reading the book, and they were saying how they loved how I sneaked in things about conspiracy theories. So I talk about a lot of conspiracy theories from 25 years ago where people told me I was a nutter, but now I can put the link to Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's lovely.
It's gone from conspiracy theory to this, and then I sneaked in a lot more to try and get people investigating. So there's a massive back of the book with references, but it's like, if you don't believe anything I'm saying, you click on these links, you know. And that's kind of also obviously what we do in Not On The Beeb. You know, it might sound incredible, some of the stuff we're talking about, but here are the links, here are the studies. You know, it's actually on government websites. You don't even need to go somewhere off. It's the information's there if you want to find it. So that book is a fun taster towards things maybe not appearing as they,
and also very reflective of yourself as well. Like when you go through the process of what you were taught, for example, about what was happening in Argentina, and the war. That's really interesting, because you first of all, you're sort of in the mode of what you learnt as a child. Your mum, it sounds like she was just very wonderful, and she had a greater understanding than almost everybody in the rest of the country about what was really going. She was like, these are decent people, these are not bad people. But these were our enemies. We were told these were our enemies. And again, that's a really wonderful way that you've been able to reflect back on your history.
Yeah, I mean, thanks again, Sonia, for picking up on that. That's really lovely. And yeah, it's absolutely true. So I was a 14-year-old boy wanting adventure. I didn't know that you could kind of go traveling by yourself. So for me, adventure was join the army. That's how you kind of went, you know, you got paid, you could go overseas. That was the kind of job opportunity. So when the Falklands War started, you know, my stepdad used to put the Daily Mail on the table. So that was my gateway to the world before the internet, you know, the Daily Mail. So I was, you know, the Falklands War for me was like a football competition. You know, every day it was like, how many got killed on this, and how many planes we got this, and it was all like this. And I wanted to go and join. I had relatives who were off to go and fight, and I was like, I'm not old enough to go. And my mum was like, yeah, as you say, Mark, you've got this all wrong. The Argentinian people are really lovely and everything else. But I kept all the newspaper clippings. I was really obsessed with it. I bought all the books and all the aeroplanes, everything else. So then when I turned up in Argentina, in 1993, I was one of the first British people that most of the Argentinians met. So I then got to hear their version.
Amazing.
And this, you know, when people talk about waking up points, this was a major waking up point, because I kind of realized that, so much of what we've been told was, you know, complete and utter baloney. And the very basic thing, from kind of a little boy having a version of a comic book version of the war, was turning up and realizing that we'd sent our trained paratroopers, our highly trained, the best of the best, and the soldiers that were sent to go and fight this parachute, they kept their real army at home, because they knew it was a bit dangerous messing around with another highly trained army. They conscripted people off the street. So they took the identification numbers, and it was literally like a lottery. If a number ended even, you went, or if it was odd, you stayed, or the other way around. I can't remember that. But literally, boys were getting conscripted, 2 days of training, getting a gun put in the hand and put on the ships to go out and fight the Argentinians. And I remember reading about paratroopers who had said they'd found American spies, and they didn't like American spies amongst them, so they shot them. They kind of basically shot them on the spot because it's a spy, and then they'd fold them up and put a grenade in their belly, let the grenade off, and there'd be no body left. So they couldn't see they'd been kind of shot in the head. So I remember reading about that and going, American spies. But of course what it was young boys who'd learned English well, going in really good accents. They'd been to American schools, they'd been conscripted, going, please don't shoot me in an American accent. So this, you know, and then I became great friends with, you know, Argentinian lads, and I went through, you know, seeing some of the trauma. You know, there's one bit in the book which I mentioned. You know, there was a point where it was raining in the cafe, and I was tapping everyone on the back to get everyone in out of the rain. I was going, rapido, rapido, and he just exploded in my face. And he goes, why do all you British people say rapido? And I was like, it's rapido, it's rapido, it's not rapido. And I was like, oh, this is cartoon we used to watch when we were kids. You know? I think I've got it from that. And he goes, yeah, I hate you British people. You all did that when I got kind of, you know, I was caught in the Falklands. But, you know, your soldiers were kind of bashing us in with rifles to be, you know, with our hands up as we were surrendered, going rapido, rapido. And I was just, you know, connecting these two dots and hearing
really
it up to
important.
face. I really, you know, my mum was right. You know, the Argentina, lovely. I would have moved there. I actually got back from South America and just moved straight to Spain. I hadn't been to Spain since a kid, but I was like, South America's too far to me to move to. But I want to be in that Latin kind of atmosphere.
Here's to Mark's mum. We've got to let him go, unfortunately. You have to come back. No, you have to come back. There's so many stories
I'm going to have a read of it as well
with you.
before you come back.
Absolutely.
I
Thank you
that.
so much for joining us this morning, Mark. God bless you.
And thanks for your time, Sonia. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Take good care of yourself.
Cheers.
Bye. Mark Playne, everybody.